just in way of introduction, it's been fun at the summit because I think there's been so many different ways we've learned how to kind of connect, understand, relate to our pollinators, to our invertebrates. I'm still kind of, from the last couple of sessions, just new explorations there I wasn't really even thinking about, and that's really opening some new eyes. And we've heard the thread, too, through some of the other presentations, the importance of other ways we can engage by actually contributing to what we know, what we learn about the resident invertebrates that we share our spaces with. Those that may be more important that we want to think about, know about, and help work with our state to be able to conserve. Things that we just actually want to know how important Colorado is, or our backyard, or the tips of our mountains. So we're lucky today to have 3 programs that we're going to share that are doing the work for us here in Colorado and engaging many of you, hopefully, and if not, soon we'll be engaging maybe you in helping to do this work. So to explore this topic around new findings through community science, we've got, we'll hear from Native Bee Watch with Lisa Mason, who's a horticultural specialist and entomologist with Colorado State University. We'll then hear about the Colorado Butterfly Monitoring Network with Rich Reading, who's the Vice President in Science and Conservation with the Butterfly Pavilion. And then we'll wrap up with the Mountain States Bumblebee Atlas with Amy Dolan, the Endangered Species Conservation Biologist with the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. Like the previous panel, we'll do some presentations, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions and discussion. So please, be prepared if you got questions. Wave someone down, write your question on the pad, and we'll get that up so I can make sure we get the questions into our conversation. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Okay. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you all so much for having me today. I apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a little bit of laryngitis here. I actually sound way better than I did a week ago. So thanks for bearing with me. So excited to be here to talk to you about the Native Bee Watch Community Science Program. This program is part of Colorado State University Extension. And if you're not familiar with CSU Extension, we're essentially the outreach branch of the university, and we have an office in nearly every county. CSU Extension offers a wide variety of programming listed up on the screen, but for today, I'm going to talk about the Native Bee Watch Community Science Program. This actually, just a brief history, started as my graduate school work at CSU with 3 small gardens in Fort Collins, and it has grown, it's snowballed so much since then. I had no idea that was coming. Looking back when I was a grad student, which is so exciting. We started off as a small in-person program, 20 to 25 volunteers. And the first question was, can community scientists collect accurate data? And that first chapter paper, that's the citations on the screen, yes, with enough engagement, one-on-one work and training, yes, our community scientists were collecting data comparable to a researcher. But then fast forward to the pandemic, and we had to either cancel all in-person work or do virtual programming. So we pivoted and decided to offer it virtual and thought, well, if everything's virtual, let's open this up statewide. And this response has been absolutely amazing. Now that we're post-pandemic, we're in this hybrid virtual format. So still open statewide. Anyone can participate without any prior knowledge. And we're exploring in-person trainings and other ways to engage volunteers with this. We started with 25 volunteers. This year we had 67 volunteers, and they observed over 10,000 bees. So pretty amazing. Our community science program uses what we call the focal plant sampling procedure. And really one of the big goals with Native Bee Watch is we want to know what plants the bees are visiting. And so basically you walk along a transect or you observe groups of plants and observe them for 2 minutes. We use a concept called morphospecies. And we do that because we all know bees are very hard to identify. And it's hard to learn the genera, even from photos sometimes. So this morphospecies was a way to get non-scientists involved in a hopefully non-intimidating way to learn more about the diversity of bees in their landscape. Of the 8 morpho categories, one example is the hairy belly bee, which comprises all the bees in the Megachilidae family. So these are our cavity nesting bees, and one of the characteristics that they all share is they have special pollen collecting hairs on the underside of their abdomen, which often is visible when they're visiting the flower. We've tried a variety of engagement tools over the years, and we're still trying new things. This year, we tried out a volunteer appreciation over Zoom and had almost 20 of our volunteers attend, and they got to share stories and talk about the season. And so we're continuing to explore different ways to engage volunteers statewide. One thing that I think has been really helpful is our 50-question identification quiz. Our program does require a lot of self-study, and so once volunteers take the training, they take a quiz to test their identification skills. This includes determining bees from flies and wasps, and then the identifying bees to the 8 different morphospecies categories. This serves as a way, it's not a pass or fail. If you don't get an 85% or higher on your first go-around, that's just a note that, hey, maybe I should study a little bit more, ask more questions, review the training materials, and take the quiz again. So we encourage the quiz as a learning tool and hopefully not a bottleneck for participation. With the theme of today of new terrain in community science, I do want to focus on what some of the other research we have going on. We were recently awarded a grant through the National Science Foundation to incorporate adult learning, social science, and also AI and machine learning to Native Bee Watch. And with the goal, we're focused on the volunteers. We want to support volunteer learning so that they can not only have a good time participating, but also contribute high quality data. And so a little bit more about that. From that Venn diagram, I'll talk about each of the 3 categories. The pollinator ecology, of course, is, that's why we're all here. We chose to do observational data, thinking that is very complementary to other traditional research of like collecting specimens. And in Native Bee Watch, we're probably not going to find a rare species that's going to go on the endangered species list, but we can certainly find trends and understand the plants the bees are visiting and look at different landscapes and different factors that might contribute to those bees visiting those flowers. And so this method is complementary. We're not killing bees. We're avoiding that taxonomic bottleneck. And we're collecting photos with the observations. So one of our next questions is, in this virtual training model, are volunteers contributing accurate data? So we're re-looking at that question again. We talked about morphospecies, and again, each observation that a volunteer submits, there's a plant attached with that bee observation. In terms of adult learning research, a lot of community science programs has focused on the scientific outcomes, data accuracy, the quantity and quality of the data coming in, and not so much how that volunteer is learning. And we partnered with Dr. Jill Zaretsky and her PhD student at CSU, and she's an adult learning expert. So she's here to help. They do pre and post-season surveys, and we implement the feedback based on adult learning theory each year, which I think long-term that's really helping to support our volunteer learning. So they're focused on adult learning theory, aligning training methods with learning outcomes, assessing adult learning and participation on an annual basis, and then applying those instructional design principles to our training, which is going to be even more important when I talk about the AI that we're incorporating. Thus far, some of the themes that have come out from the adult learning aspect of our research are building confidence and skills among our volunteers. So bees are hard to identify, and we have a cohort of volunteers that they've taken the training and they're practicing, but they don't quite feel confident enough to make that leap to actually submit data. So how can we better support them so they do feel confident and they are collecting accurate data? Another one was recognizing challenges and seeking resources. So volunteers, of course, they want that immediate feedback that like they can get from iNaturalist and such things. And as we scale up, that's we do our best for sure, but we are limited to myself and Nancy, who's our student hourly for Native Bee Watch. So as we grow, how can we give volunteers that immediate feedback? Another thing that came out of that is we have beginners and they're just learning a bee from a fly, all the way to volunteers that are learning their bee genera. And so how can we have training resources that supports all levels of learning? And then the other major theme we've learned that volunteers come and they participate and they get different meaning out of the program. Some want to contribute to science. Others just want to learn what's going on in their backyard. And I love that, the more they watch bees, the more they observe in their backyards. And it's a wonderful thing. So how can we support the different motivations and the different meanings that people bring to the program? In terms of AI, I know this is a big question. How can AI support community scientists? From our perspective, it's going to support volunteer learning, not necessarily identifying something to the finest level of taxonomy. So there's 3 components that our partners with the Department of Computer Science on campus are working hard at right now. So that first component is the photo identification piece, and we are focused on bees, flies, and wasps, and those 8 morphospecies categories. And then the second part is going to be adding this explainable AI to the picture. And the best way I can describe that is the hierarchy presented on the screen. So basically, a volunteer will take sort of a quiz, and based on the results of that quiz, will give tailored lessons to that volunteer. So let's say we have a volunteer that's really stuck on identifying that fly versus a bee. Instead of moving on to the morphospecies, it's going to give that volunteer more lessons, more examples of bees versus flies. And then they can progress as they learn more knowledge. And so hopefully that will help give volunteers immediate feedback and just cater to what they're learning based on the background that they bring in as a volunteer. And then they're going to combine number 1 and number 2 with an interface, hopefully an app. Right now it's on a desktop computer with a user-friendly way to use the system and support volunteers as they collect data. So ultimately, we want to support that volunteer learning with those tailored lessons and immediate feedback for volunteers. In turn, we're hoping that will produce more accurate ecological data that can be used for research. And if this is successful, we hope this could be a template for future community science programs, or maybe even scale up monitoring to contribute to pollinator conservation. If you're interested in learning more about Native Bee Watch, I have the QR code on the screen. We have a data dashboard, so you can actually explore through the map, through dates. You can sort through pictures and see what volunteers collected this year. Do note our plant list was, that's directly from the volunteer. So there might be misspellings and things, but it's sure fun to see what our hardworking volunteers have done this summer. We also have a couple of field guides. So if you're wanting to dive in a little bit on bee identification, both field guides are a great place to start. If you're a school teacher, you can actually, there's STEM kits available to borrow at CSU. And some of those activities were based on Native Bee Watch data collected in Fort Collins. And we also have other resources like extension fact sheets, blog posts, webinars. So check out the websites. We'd love for you to be involved. If you do want to learn more, you can sign up for our newsletter. And I want to thank everybody that is part of the team. The School of Education, Dr. Zaretsky and her PhD student, Lauren Violin. They are awesome at adult learning and education, the Department of Computer Sciences, our other contributors, and most of all, our citizen scientists, our community scientists. I know we have several in the room, and we couldn't do this without you. And the momentum and the energy you bring is what's propelling this program forward. So thank you all so very much.
Thanks for having me. Hi, I'm not Sharon Hershkovitz. That's our lepidopterist, and she had a butterfly emergency and had to rush off to Sumatra. So you stuck with me. Anything you like about this talk, you can thank Sharon. Anything you don't like, I'm the guy to blame. So without further ado, let me get into the talk a little bit about first Butterfly Pavilion. For those of you who don't know, we're the first AZA, which is Association of Zoos and Aquariums, accredited invertebrate zoo that's standalone. So we are weird in that we don't do vertebrates. We do things without backbones. We have terrestrial invertebrates, we have aquatic invertebrates, and of course we have butterflies in our conservatory. And we exist to develop and foster an appreciation for invertebrates through education, research, and conservation. And so if you haven't been, I invite you all to come out and visit us. I think you'll love it. In terms of the Colorado Butterfly Monitoring Network, this is a long-term based project. It relies on community volunteers across Colorado. As you can see with this map, similar to the map we saw before, a lot of the data are collected in the Northern Front Range. We're trying to change that. It was established in 2013, so this is our 12th year that we just completed. And we've observed over 1,000 butterflies through the program. We've generated a lot of important data on 172 native butterflies. So really getting a lot of good data out there. And what's our protocol? Well, we use single observers. If there's another person, that person can walk along and help with data collection, but only one person at a time collects the data. And we use this modified Pollard technique, which is if you can visualize a bubble around yourself, any butterfly you see within 6 meters of you in any direction through that bubble can be counted. Anything beyond that, you don't count. So with that, we walk slowly at a moderate pace on a good day, so what we call a good butterfly habitat day, and we collect all the data on butterflies we can. So we collect data on these forms, and then the volunteers themselves enter the data into the Pollard database. And this is a nationwide program. It's actually international, where there are programs throughout the country where people are doing very similar things, and we've standardized across. I'm getting dry mouth. Excuse me. So what's new to the program? Put my glasses on. We've got checkout kits now for field guides and resources. We have bilingual programs, and we have trainings that we do throughout the state. We have grant program to bring this program to other parts of Colorado, especially the western slope and out on the eastern plains, because we do have, as you can see, as you saw in that previous slide, we have an overpreponderance of data from the Northern Front Range. So we're really trying hard to get out to places like Ridgeway State Park, Steamboat Lake, Pearl Lake State Parks, places like that. And we're partnering with a wide variety of organizations like the Space Force, the City of Fort Collins, the City of Aurora, and the City of Boulder. We have actually specified office hours and support for the community scientists. So if they have problems of any sort, they can reach out to us during those dedicated hours. And we've collected a lot of data. If you exclude the first year where we were just getting started, you can see we've involved a lot of people in a lot of routes. So 48% of the routes were new to the program in 2023, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about 2023 in that our 2024 season just concluded last month. So we've collected 553, almost 554 hours of monitoring last year, which is the highest yet. And the number of butterflies we found per hour was about 27.6, which compared very well with 2021 and 2022. We also had the highest number of volunteers to date, 67, and we had 13 participating counties, which is also the highest. So we're still, like I said, we're still processing the 2024 data, so I'll keep you informed as to what happens there. We're getting great data. We published our first paper this year, and it showed, much to our surprise, that we weren't seeing what we expected, which was we expected to see butterfly populations moving up in altitude and maybe northerly in the face of climate change. We did not see that yet, but of course it's only 12 years of data. We also have data, part of that cumulative group of organizations that's collecting data that's in a paper that's in review in Science. So we're starting to see trends. A positive trend is the increasing number of butterflies per hour, the way we standardize it over time. And if we look more closely in particular one species with monarchs, and again, you can exclude the first year because we had so few volunteers. We saw a big boom in number of monarchs in 2021, and that's increased. This is very heartening because, as you all know, monarchs are petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act. We're going to find out soon whether or not they get listed. They're declining rapidly. As a side note, we just got a grant to plant more butterfly habitat in Mexico at their overwintering site. So we're very excited to be going down there, planting Oyamur fir trees higher in altitude than the trees that already exist, some of the deforested areas. So as climate change occurs, those butterflies can move up further higher up the altitude, the sides of the mountains. So that's pretty exciting. So we're seeing more monarchs. That's exciting. It's yet to be seen whether these trends are real or maybe just a blip on the screen, but we're hopeful. So what's next? I told you about the publications. We're also doing joint trainings, and we're moving to new parts of the state, and we're working to train virtually. So I think one thing that the COVID epidemic taught us was that we could do a lot of this stuff virtually, and we can get to parts of the state that are a lot harder to get to. So we're doing that now. We're still aiming to monitor every county in Colorado, and really, really much more. So with that, I'm hoping to see many of you guys out there next year. You can reach out to us. Here's a QR code. I know Sharon Hershkovich, whose email is up here. If you want to reach me, my email address is simply rreading. So just like it sounds, reading a book, reading at butterflies.org. And again, I'm hoping that with your support, we can expand what we're doing out there. Thanks.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here and sticking with us towards the end of the day. My name is Amy Dolan. I am a conservation biologist with the Xerces Society, and the community science project I want to tell you about is the Mountain States Bumblebee Atlas, where we're working together to conserve bumblebees one photograph at a time. You've heard about the Xerces Society a couple times today. If you are not familiar with it, we are a science-based nonprofit that is working solely on invertebrate conservation. We have grown a lot in the last few years. We now have almost 100 people working on invertebrate projects all across the U.S., doing really great work, which is really exciting. My role is I am part of the Bumblebee Atlas team, and I was hired to coordinate the Mountain States Bumblebee Atlas. I am pretty new to Xerces, and this is a new program. This is a new project. It launched in June 2024. And the mountain states are Colorado, Nevada, Utah, and Wyoming. So we're expanding a little bit. So we're thinking about bumblebees more on a large regional scale, not limited just to Colorado. And so what our goal is this is really all about data collection. We want to utilize passionate people in the community to find, photograph, and map native bumblebees. There are a lot of factors that are affecting bumblebees, and we want to know where are they currently, what habitats are they relying on, what food sources are they relying on, so that we can take that information and turn it into conservation action. Bumblebees, bees are hard to identify, especially from photos. Bumblebees you can identify to species from photos if you have the right photos. And so anything that we do as action that results of this project for conserving bumblebees is going to help all of our bees and all of our native pollinators as well. The Mountain States Bumblebee Atlas is just one of seven, I think, atlas projects that Xerces is running. We have a team of 7, and in 2024, this past summer, we had 20 states covered by a Bumblebee Atlas. So we have community scientists all across the U.S. that are out looking for bumblebees, catching them, photographing them, sharing data, and helping us figure out where are these native pollinators. You can see up there, we work with a variety of partners. We partner with federal agencies, state agencies, nonprofits, native plant societies, anybody who's willing to join us in this pursuit, we're excited to work with. This is our why. We know that pollinators are in danger. There was research that came out in the early 2000s that showed of our 50-ish North American bumblebee species, 25% are experiencing some level of decline. We know that there are a variety of factors that are causing this, from pathogens that are affecting them, competition from commercial bees, habitat loss, pesticides, and climate change. And these are affecting all of our native bees at the same time. And so they're experiencing all of these stressors. And so we want to know, what can we do to help them? And to prioritize conservation, we need to know where the bees are. So thinking about knowing that they need our help and our support, the first two things up there are things that everyone can do, right? Plant flowers so that they have food sources, create habitat for nesting and overwintering. There are organizations and people like the Xerces Society that is working to get ESA, endangered species, protection for several of our bumblebee species. We have in Colorado 6 species that are considered species of greatest conservation need that have been petitioned for listing under the ESA. But that by itself is not enough to protect them. We have to take action. We have to do things to help them. And in order to do that, we need to know where they are. And we have some serious gaps in data in order to make informed decisions about how to prioritize our action. And this is really where the Bumblebee Atlas comes in. So this is what I mean by data gaps. Each of those dots is a bumblebee observation since the year 2000 from our North American Bumblebees database that one of my coworkers manages in California. Some of these are scientific research projects. A lot of them are iNaturalist observations. And iNaturalist observations are awesome for creating a list of what's here. But you can see that it's a little biased. You can tell where the urban centers are. Where there's more people, there's more observations. And the other thing that's difficult to tell from information like this is, what was the survey effort? It's really hard to detect population trends from just a single dot. So that dot, was that because there was 20 bees there and they took a picture of one? Or was somebody sitting there all day waiting to see that one bee that was going to be there? And we don't have that information, and we need that information in order to help inform conservation decisions. And what Xerces does a lot of is education and helping to motivate land managers to make conservation decisions. So that's what we are doing with the Bumblebee Atlas. It's really fun. Anybody can join, anybody can participate. You don't need to have any background knowledge. We are working with biologists, with state and federal agencies. We are working with any random person that says, hey, I want to help with that. You don't need to know anything. I love to teach about bumblebees. I like to explain. I like to show how to do the protocols. And that's what my job is to show people how to do it. So if you wanted to become a Bumblebee Atlas volunteer, the first step is training to really understand the protocols, because like I said, we want to know what is the survey effort. So we can't just go out and photograph the bees. We need a standardized protocol so we can compare data over time, and that can give us relative abundance, and that can help us put information into models to make predictions and recommendations. So step one is training, and we have a lot of different ways of trainings, like we heard here from the other people. But we have online videos, we host live webinars. There is a participant handbook that you can print off. There's a lot of online materials. And then the spring and summer is basically Amy goes on the road and leads webinar or workshops and field events to actually train people on our protocols. And over the winter and the fall, I'm happy to go and speak to other people. I've been doing virtual workshops of just teaching people about the biology, conservation of bumblebees. The second step is to adopt a grid cell. And this is where what we're doing is kind of on a large scale. We are trying to get bumblebee data at a large regional scale, and we really want to spread the effort out. So we have divided the 4 states of the Mountain States Bumblebee Atlas into 371 grid cells. Each of them is 50 by 50 kilometers. And our goal is to sample at least 75% of them, hopefully all of them. And then when a volunteer adopts a grid cell, they are saying that they will go out during the field season, so May to August or September, and conduct 2 standardized surveys looking for bumblebees for us. We encourage people to move away from those urban centers and get to some of those places where people haven't found bumblebees or people haven't even looked for bumblebees before. Step 3 is really fun. This is where you go out and you find bumblebees. We train people to catch them with a net, carefully put them in a vial, and then we put them on ice, and that chills them down. It doesn't harm them, but it knocks them out, so you can take a series of photographs of them so that we can identify them to species. And then you have these adorable little sleeping bees that you watch wake up and then fly away. In addition to taking really good pictures of the bumblebees, that's key for this to work, is our volunteers also do a habitat assessment. So every bumblebee is connected to the flower they were collected on. And then they also record what type of habitat was it, what kind of nesting habitat is there overwintering habitat there, what kind of land management do you see. So we have a data sheet that our volunteers fill out. The data, all of that information and the photographs get uploaded to our data management website, which is Bumblebee Watch. We are, speaking of AI, we're looking at incorporating Bee Machine into this as well to try to get a little bit more information so that a volunteer, instead of having to wait for me to get to the thousands of bumblebee pictures and identify them, that the Bee Machine, the AI, can maybe give an idea of what it is, and then I just have to double check it, especially because we have a lot of tricky species that are really similar. That's not set up yet, but we're looking at how we can be a little bit more like iNaturalist and having some suggestions that AI gives so that people who are wanting to learn their bumblebee species can get a little bit quicker feedback. What's really exciting is for me thinking about the future and the power that community science has. So Bumblebee Watch started as something similar to iNaturalist in 2014, just a place for people to post pictures of bumblebees and have somebody tell them what they were. The very first Bumblebee Atlas started in the Pacific Northwest in 2018, and you can see that observations just skyrocketed. Every year since then, we've added a project, and the observations have just really gone up. So we are very quickly learning a lot about our native bumblebees, where they are, what plants they're using, what habitats they're relying on. In the mountain states, we have just begun. The Atlas actually kind of started before I started this job, so it was just our first year. But I'm really proud of what we did in that first year. This is a huge area to be, covering. But of all of those 371 grid cells, 68 got adopted this first year. 177 surveys were conducted, over 800 observations, 21 species, and 4 of them are of those 6 species of greatest conservation need were recorded. With that, there's already some exciting things. One of them is just the power of community science to track these species of greatest concern. So Bombus occidentalis, the western bumblebee, has been petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act. It used to be really common, and it's not. And this is just this year where we've seen it. And what we can do now is look at what do these places have in common, and what plants are they using, what habitats are they using, and that helps us to prioritize conservation. Something else that's interesting to see is this species, which is an eastern species. It used to only be known from the Dakotas east, and it seems to be creeping west. And is that because nobody's looked, or is it really expanding its range? We're not sure, but this is a way with the Bumblebee Atlas we can monitor this and see what happens, because if a new species is coming in, what does that mean for the species that are already here? So there's questions that are there, but there's power of what we can get from our community scientists. The Southern Plains bumblebee is another one that's on our list of species to watch, and this is just showing that there are pockets where there are some good and healthy populations, and so that again helps us to prioritize which lands should we be conserving and what can we learn from those places about how to manage for these pollinators. And I know this one isn't in the mountain states, but this was really exciting. For the first time since the 1950s, this species, Bombus terricola, was seen in South Dakota. One of our surveys found it. And so this is a species that has been in decline, and that was kind of a big deal for all of us. So I'm really excited to see over the next couple years what an exciting network of people can do across the mountain states, how we can fill in those gaps and figure out where our bumblebees are and how we can help them to support their populations or even recover their populations if they're in decline. If you're interested, that's our website. You can sign up for a newsletter. You can send me an email. I'd love to hear from any of you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Lisa, Amy, Rich. Really appreciate that. If you do have questions, please make sure you flag someone down with the card to write your questions down. While we get some questions, I just wanted to start out because I think you were all kind of touched on a little bit that one of the things and the challenges we have is oftentimes with community science, it's kind of based on where people are. But yet our state is big, lots of areas, and less population in certain parts that we'd really love more information about what's there. So maybe if you could each, or those who want to share, talk a little bit about, I think, the challenges around that, and you may reemphasize some of the things you're thinking about trying to do to connect with that, or maybe even reach into the I wish bag, and if we could do this, this would make a difference there. If you want to give your thoughts about that challenge we face.
There we go. Yeah, it's a big challenge. One of the things we're doing is, as you noticed, we're reaching out to things like state parks, land trusts, people that we know are interested in nature and conservation, but that are distributed a little more widely across the landscape, and trying to do trainings out in those areas with those people to try to get more of the landscape, and then trying to just make it easy for people by going to them or providing virtual trainings. But it's a challenge, there's no doubt about it. And it shows the strong bias in the data we get from community science, which is always going to be a tricky piece.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One thing that we're trying to do is that's what the grid cells are for, is to help to spread it out a little bit by asking people to choose a grid cell and adopt it. Hopefully they can think of like, where might I want to go and explore and do that. We also are thinking very much about who can we partner with that's also interested in this information. So we've been talking to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I'm doing a training for the Forest Service. We're working with Bureau of Land Management. So working with those biologists who are already out in some of those really remote areas doing other work and seeing, can they do a Bumblebee Atlas survey while they're out there as well? And then just really figuring out how can we connect to those smaller communities, those rural communities, because we want them to be part of this learning and this contributing as well. And it is a challenge. So just finding ways to communicate and get the word out there. So if you have ideas, we'd love to hear that.
I'd echo everything Rich and Amy just said, including partnerships. You know, one thing that I'm excited about is we're, Native Bee Watch is going to partner with the Colorado Natural Heritage Program on their biodiversity survey. And we're not entirely sure how that's all going to work, but like one idea we had was they have volunteers going out taking data on rare plants, and we have volunteers going out observing bees. Like, is there, 2 trainings for the price of one, and collect data in areas maybe that we have not collected data before. So I think that's one option is partnerships, and with CSU Extension too, with an office in every county, our county offices have those connections with those local communities. So I think there's certainly opportunities to market community science programs and get the word out better. That's one thing I'm hoping to do more to expand our geographic reach.
We've got a question here, and it kind of touches a little bit on that last point of how to get the word out. The question was how do volunteers typically hear about your programs? And I'm going to add to that is how do we get the word out? How do we reach out to make sure people know there's a program here that if they're interested, that they may want to, connect with and be involved with?
That's a great question. And honestly, that's very limited on my own capacity on how much time, I can't grow the program too quickly because we got to make sure that we can accommodate the number of volunteers. So it's a very delicate balance. I've primarily relied on word of mouth and other programs like the Master Gardener program, the Native Plant Master program, all offered through CSU Extension. So I think there's another opportunity to work with partner organizations, find out if they have a newsletter, see if they'll share your social media post. Really relying on those partnerships to amplify messaging, I think, is important.
I would echo all of that. And it's so much is limited by the capacity of when there's one person managing something so big. But another thing that I was thinking about is we tend to get the people like you who are looking for activities like this. And then how can we find the people that maybe aren't already self-selecting who would be just as valuable and would, take so much away from this. And so I've been thinking about how can we get more into local newspapers, local news outlets. And that again is it's a ton of work to try to do that. But as I do a little tour of trainings in the summer, that's something that I want to look into more, is how can I connect to those communities through their local news organizations.
Yeah, echoing all that as well. We're lucky in that we have a marketing department and they do some outreach for us through electronic advertising. But it's hard to get to all the different groups we want to get to, and partnerships are the best way.
Okay, Rich, there was a specific question on the increase you've been seeing with the monarchs through the observations, and is that in part due just from increased number of volunteers and hours out looking?
Good question. I don't believe so, because if you looked at the data, and I could go back and throw up the slide, the number of observers hasn't increased that much, and we standardize it by number of animals per hour that we observe. And so it's a way to kind of look at the data more comparably across time. But even if you look back 3 or 4 years, we had 50 to 60 people out. We might have had 67 this year, and we might have had 50 routes and 74 routes. But the number of observations of monarchs has gone up by a factor of 10 or more. So I think it's a real increase. What's causing that increase is not clear. Why the monarchs are fluctuating so greatly is unclear to everyone. I know that in the Western population, they went from having just a few thousand individuals after having millions to having hundreds of thousands in the last couple of years, and they're not clear as to why that's happening either. But it's a great question. It's if you have an idea or an answer, I'd love to hear it.
Okay, and Amy and Lisa, this is more about the plants that you're kind of seeing being reported that are real beneficial or popular. It was directed towards bumblebees, but I'm going to also take it to the bees in general, because both of you are collecting information about the plants that are associated with the sightings that are happening.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of that information yet because it's so soon, but bumblebees are generalists and they will use the flowers that are available. I would love to say that they're using all of the native plants, but sometimes there's very dry areas and the only things that are available are weeds along the roadside, and the bumblebees will use those. And so sometimes if we were just to publish, here's the plants that we found the bumblebees on, I don't think that would be the best plant these list, because that's just what they're using because that's what's there. So that is, we're having internal conversations about that too. And then once we get these baseline data of where are the bumblebees, where are we prioritizing, then like in the Pacific Northwest, they've shifted more to monitoring and looking at some of those questions, like what are the best plants, like what recommendations should we be making?
The plant list is a work in progress for our program too. So it's a long-term goal, and we want that information available to you all with the context of what bees were observed and where at. So we're working on a manuscript to be published soon, and then after that I don't have the exact answer on how we're going to do this yet, but we want to make that information available. Right now, if you want to explore the data dashboard, you can explore the plants that volunteers are observing. There's both native, non-native, especially in our urban areas. You're going to see a wide variety of things. But so for immediately, that would be my suggestion, is explore that data dashboard, explore the plant list on there. But long term, we want to take all this data and make that plant data available, so we can use that to make decisions on what to put in our landscapes.
Great, thanks. We had another question just about, from what we're learning, Amy, this may be a little harder given the newness of the atlas, but just, are we seeing some areas of increased biodiversity or hotspots of biodiversity that help us kind of know about where to look, or maybe make some assumptions about where to focus some of our conservation efforts?
I think urban areas can be biodiversity hotspots, and that's very anecdotally. Each year we have more and more volunteers, so we are collecting more and more bee observations. So without finishing the analysis on all that, I can't say for sure if we're seeing more bees or if it's just because more volunteers are contributing observations. But I do think, and native plants are always the best. But in urban areas, you are going to find a lot of non-native plants, and some of those plants attract a lot of bees. So I do think urban areas we can use that as a tool for bee conservation and create biodiversity hotspots. That's what I'm hopeful for in the future. Urban areas can really support that.
So with butterflies, we definitely found that mid-altitude habitats have the highest diversity of butterflies. We're not sure if that's because the lower altitudes are so highly developed and the mid-altitudes are not as developed yet. The high altitude is somewhat not surprising because they're colder and less diverse in some ways. The mid-altitude habitats are also a little more diverse. We do collect those data. I forgot to mention, omitted, that as people walk along their routes, they do indicate on their forms when they change habitat types. So we do collect those data, and that's important. But yeah, we're seeing mid-altitude highest diversity.
In general, for bumblebees, like, the mountains are a hot spot. There's a lot of biodiversity for bumblebees in cooler areas and higher latitudes, higher elevations. So it's a really fun place to be looking for bumblebees. But beyond that, there's high altitude bumblebees, things you only find up high. There's lower altitude things, and there's things that are like cross-continental. And so we are still trying to figure out, in the Mountain States region, where are those places, but then also thinking about some of the landscapes in eastern Colorado and Nevada, in some parts of Utah, where it gets really dry and there's no plants, no flowers. Where are those bees? And then we're looking at higher elevations and riparian areas, but some of that is still going to be discovered.
Awesome. I'm going to claim host privilege to last question. And this one, again, is kind of thinking more conceptually about the philosophy of participatory or community science. And we've heard about the taxonomic impediment, the geographic impediment, the educational impediment to doing things like looking and understanding what the distributions of our pollinators are and what we should be concerned about. So I'm curious what you each think the role of community science is in the future of our conservation of invertebrates, because it's such a huge task to tackle. So really briefly, thoughts?
Sorry. I think that's really exciting for me. It's an exciting challenge because pollinator conservation is going to take a lot of different methods. And it needs everybody can be a part of the solution. And so not only, we're getting good research from volunteers, but these volunteers are taking that information back to their neighborhoods, their HOAs, their cities, their family gatherings. And they have people over and they're like, look at the bees on my flowers. And that ripple effect, I think, is just going to be a huge part of the solution for pollinator conservation today. And one of my favorite things too, the volunteers come to Native Bee Watch to learn to identify bees, but then they start noticing everything else, all this other biodiversity in their home garden. And it's for me, it's like a treasure hunt. Like you're just finding these treasures. And they get really excited when they see the crab spider, camouflaging on the milkweed. And that I think is such a hopeful thing for the future. So it's going to take a lot of different tools, and it's going to take everybody. But I really do believe community science can play an important role in being part of the solution.
I would agree with all of that. And I also just think about, we can't do it without community scientists. We think about, like we heard from CPW, like invertebrates, like it's so much, right? Even bees. There's 1,008 species of native bees known in Colorado. That's probably not all of them, and trying to find all of the bumblebee species that are across these 4 humongous states. Like if a researcher's trying to do that, they're not going to be able to do that in their career. And so we need the help of community scientists who are out there anyways, hiking or camping or just enjoying nature. And so we need those people. And then the benefit is exactly what Lisa said, that they're learning so much. Like that's one of my favorite things, is teaching people about bees and just seeing the wonder of like all of these amazing stories of all of our native bees. And then they just spread it, and it just spreads. It's like it's contagious, that love of bees and pollinators.
Boy, what do I add to that? Lisa and Amy kind of nailed it. I will say that there's some criticism of it out there, but I think it's largely unfounded. I think we can control for some of the data quality issues we do in the data we analyze by how long people have been volunteers, and we actually give them exams and they get pins as they get better at identifying butterflies, for example. So you can go up from a larvae to a pupa to a full-fledged butterfly on your pin. Pretty cool. As you get better at identifying. So we can control for a lot of things by looking at energy expended and expertise. And there really is, we really can't do this work. It's way too much. There's way too many critters out there. All of us are involved in a wide variety of species. And, we're talking about one program on one group of organisms, and we need all the help we can get.
Awesome. I think all so well said. So let's give them all another big round of applause. Thanks so much.